when it comes to the wealth that's being built or to capture the next wave of wealth, it's right in front of us if we stop focusing on whether or not uh, whether or not Clay and Meg are in a relationship. If we stop focusing on whether or not uh, whether or not Trump is in office and he's doing whatever he's doing and it's not affecting your daily life, unless it is. If it is, if you're an immigrant, I'm not saying to not watch that. Watch that. Your eyes should be glued to the screen. But for the 300 million people, 320 million people who are not immigrants, unless like maybe there's something else to focus on. Maybe we shouldn't focus on what LeBron said about Memphis. Like that's what I'm getting at is that there is better things to focus on, and we and if you blink, you will miss the wave, and you will not build, you will not be able to capitalize off it. It's happening right in front of us, and it's cool to hop in the Waymo, but don't just consume it. Yo, what's up, bro? How you feeling?
Man, I am feeling phenomenal, bro. I really can't complain, man. Feeling like I'm coming off of a slow weekend, but a high from last week. That's how I would explain it.
Yeah, yeah, I get that. I get that. I get that.
How about you?
I'm feeling pretty good. I'm feeling pretty good. It's one of those long days where I got a lot done. So ultimately, I feel
You
like
still
I've
on the
been
5 a.m.s?
yeah. So
Okay.
yeah, I got up at around 4, and yeah, I've been up since then. And right now, what is it like 7 p.m. And then
Yeah,
this is
yeah,
going to
yeah.
be about an hour, and then I will go to bed about 30 minutes after that. So
Hold
pretty
on, where
much
you
my
at? You on the East Coast?
I'm on the East Coast right. Yeah. I'm in Michigan right now,
Got you.
uh, and then but I'll be back in LA soon. I'll be back in LA soon. Just out here for a couple of months.
Yeah. I'm gonna have to pull up on you. You in the D?
Yes, man.
Oh,
Come see me.
you right up the street, man.
Yes, sir.
Man. Well, shoot, man. I know as always, I feel like so much can happen in a week. You know what I
For
mean? Like,
sure.
yeah. So, go ahead and kick us off, man.
Okay. Well, let's just jump straight to it then. Last night, or actually 2 days ago, sorry, not last night, there was yet another assassination attempt against President Trump on April 25th. This happened at a White House Correspondents Association dinner in Washington. And this guy is a 31-year-old. His name is Cole Thomas Allen. He's from Torrance, California. So pretty much the LA area. That may also be in LA County. He came and checked into the hotel there, and he brought a shotgun, a pistol, knives, and he basically just tried to charge and attack Trump. They scattered. Somebody yelled out, I think like shots fired or something like that, and ultimately they got JD Vance out of there, they got Trump out of there, and ultimately Trump's still alive. He's fine, but he's had multiple assassination attempts. Now, before we get into that piece, maybe I will. I do want to mention that this guy Cole had a manifesto as well. Like he wrote like a manifesto. I think it might have been a couple of pages. I'm going to read a couple of paragraphs. I'm not going to read it all because I
I was
think
literally going to ask what was in this
yeah,
manifesto.
yeah, I'm not going to read it all, but I'm going to read
Okay.
a couple of paragraphs so that people listening or watching can understand a bit how this guy's mind was working before he tried to do this. So it started off by saying, so the New York Post posted this, by the way, and it's a 1,000-word document that he sent to his family members right before the incident. So he starts it off by saying, hello, everybody. So I may have given a lot of people a surprise today. Let me start off by apologizing to everyone whose trust I abused. I apologize to my parents for saying I had an interview without specifying it was for Most Wanted. I apologize to my colleagues and students. So he was a teacher as well. I believe he was a professor. for saying I had a personal emergency. By the time anyone reads this, I probably most certainly do need to go to the ER, but can hardly call that not a self inflicted status. I apologize to all the people I traveled next to, all the workers who handled my luggage, and all the other non targeted people at the hotel who I put in danger simply by being near. I apologize to everyone who abused and or murdered before this, to all those who suffered before I was able to attempt this, to all who may still suffer after. Regardless of my success or failure, I don't expect forgiveness, but if I could have seen another way to get this close, I would have taken it. Again, my sincere apologies. On to why I did any of this. I am a citizen of the United States of America. What my representatives do reflects on me, and I am no longer willing to permit a pedophile, rapist, and a traitor to coat my hands with his crimes. Those are the first couple of paragraphs.
There's so much to, I mean, there's so much to really unpack here, right? I mean, because I think if I remember hearing right, I think his sister even came out and eventually said that like he had mentioned like radical statements and things of that nature.
I
So
didn't know that. It's not surprising though.
yeah. So I mean, the other thing that's very interesting is like his brother came out and said like as soon as he got the email of the manifesto, like he immediately called. And so it seems like they weren't surprised
Yeah,
seeing something like this come about. And so I'm always kind of curious is like when did it flip to this?
right.
Like what and the other thing too is like I mean, I do think we need to unpack like what might actually get a person to this place where they feel like they have to take this action. Because I think what's very interesting about each of these shootings, and I think this is one thorough line, not the thorough line of all this, is the sentiment around it, right? So think about, the most famous one is like John F. Kennedy, right? Like
Yeah,
I think this, like obviously we worked around at that time, but it's an assassination that has carried through like multiple generations, and the sentiment is like one where like people endear like this, this figure. I don't think that's the sentiment with Trump. Like
nah, not at all.
you know
Not
what
at
I
all.
mean? And so when you got someone responding the way this gunman responded, and the sentiment in across the US right now is like his approval ratings are showing it. It's like what is going on? Because I think it would be different if he was like highly rated or whatever, but it's like was this man justified to potentially go?
Yeah,
And so I'm curious. I'm curious.
he feels
What are you seeing?
justified. He feels
Yeah.
justified. Clearly, clearly. I also think he's fearless. Clearly,
Did
he
you
doesn't
see
even
the
have a
video?
job. No, I didn't see the video.
Bro, go watch the video. Like my
I gotta
man
watch the
line
video.
imagine somebody lining up
I saw
down
clips.
like bro, he just took off like he sprinted so fast.
So I under so he's beyond fearless. He has no he doesn't even have courage because he's not fearful. He doesn't even have courage. To have courage, you need to have fear first, and you need to. So he doesn't even have that.
No,
So
no, no, no.
he is. So look, I didn't see what his brother and his sister said, but it would not surprise me if they maybe they don't like Trump either. Maybe it's a family who typically is liberal or progressive or votes Democrat. But sometimes you can tell when people are taking it to another level or when things are a little bit more extreme. Like you might say, okay, yeah, I'm going for Trump or I'm going for Kamala, but then someone takes it to another level and you're like, wait, hold on, this is a little bit further than the typical like maybe like the policies or whatever it is. And based on just those how he ended that second paragraph, to me, that comes down to the narratives that have been spun. He mentioned pedophile, racist, or
Yeah.
rapist, not racist. Even though some would say that as well, he mentioned that, and I think that that shows somebody that was really deep in the political media sphere, whether it was traditional media or it was social media. If I had to guess, it was probably likely, more than likely, social media. It wouldn't shock me if it was TikTok, those type of medias, although I don't know for sure. So this sounds like a guy who felt like he was taking matters into his own hands. For somebody that, in my opinion, I would say is probably not the most mentally healthy, he did get close to Trump. Like he got close. He didn't pull it off, but this guy got close. Now, in the rest of his manifesto, which anybody can read, it's easy. You can just a Google search or go to go to ChatGPT and it'll pull it up, or Grok, whatever your favorite AI is.
Hmm.
And there's other concerning things. Like he was willing to kill people if they were in the way. Like he didn't want to do it, is what he mentioned in the manifesto.
Yeah,
But
yeah, he did mention it.
if he had to, then he was willing to do that, and he was very passionate
Let me
about
let me
that.
let me ask you a question about one piece of the manifesto where I do find this interesting. I do find this
Okay.
interesting. So, in part of his manifesto, he wrote, I walk in with multiple weapons, and not a single person there considers the possibility that I could be a threat. And what he was really getting at was like mocking the security that is supposed to exist at this type of, event for president or these folks of like this caliber. And it was really, this sense of arrogance, right? Like that we just kind of had, or the security team just kind of had. So I'm just kind of curious, yeah, your thoughts, like when you hear that, like the man literally told, like he wrote down, or was it just by
Yeah, I
chance,
remember
or
that.
was
I
it
remember that.
chance?
Yeah, I do remember he wrote the original manifesto, but then he had got to I think the hotel a day before, and then he got through easily, and then he was like, "These guys are like basically a joke." And so a couple of things, and I'm just gonna go off the top of my head. So the first thing I would say is that it is strange that maybe they didn't consider people who come the day before to make sure that there's a level of security and there's a level of making sure that people, it is a bit strange, especially considering the fact that Trump is a highly hated figure, like passionately hated figure. He's not just, people either clearly, like literally love or hate him in a serious way enough to want to kill him. So it is a bit surprising, a bit. But then also, in that same manifesto, I believe that he mentioned that they were focused on people who seemed to potentially be threats, like protesters, etc. So maybe it was a case of being distracted, and that is still on them to make sure that doesn't happen. And I'm sure after that, stuff like that is not going to happen.
Yeah,
But I do think there's arrogance,
yeah,
a bit.
yeah, and it's possible here too. I mean, it was just a blind spot, right? Like
Yeah,
some things you can't really. And once again, this
right.
is all in hindsight for us to say it was easy, but
Yeah,
it's like, yeah,
yeah,
I do want to say we don't know. I think something I do think is interesting is I went and looked up, hey, where does Trump, rank when it comes to the number of presidents that have had an attempt against them? And so he actually has the most. But I think the broader thing that is very interesting is more so like what was happening in the environment of the country when these attempts were happening. So like for some history, obviously, hopefully everybody on the pod knows that like Abraham Lincoln, was killed during the Civil War. Like, we may be talking to some young generations now. Maybe they don't
yeah. I
teach
was
that
gonna
in
say
school
maybe
anymore.
Gen Z doesn't know that.
They don't teach that in school anymore. But that was during the Civil War. So you had the North and the South. And then you had McKinley, which was like the start of literally the 20th century, so the early 1900s. That's where, if you think about it, technology was transferring. We were going from being agriculture to industrial. And then you had Kennedy, Cold War, right? And so now you have Trump, where some people would say, like, from an economic standpoint, you got AI, that is literally transforming, our world, or has the promise of doing that. But it's on top of like everything is polarized. Like you're on both, like there's no middle. You've chosen a side. And so I do think the environment is very interesting to just like observe, and how that does impact the psychology and how crowds start to respond. Because if I'm gonna be honest, just being here in Chicago and having seen the number of No Kings protests and how people, just are out there, and I'm sure you've seen that in like LA too.
LA, definitely in LA. It's all the time.
This is the thing we have to trust ourselves on when we see this type of shit, is we've already lived through it. We have a good example, and it is called George Floyd riots. Anyone who sensed that understands what people are capable of when the energy starts to rise. And if I'm gonna be honest, I think the energy is rising a little bit slower than George Floyd, because George Floyd was like a very heightened period of time, but it did last for a very long time.
It
But
did, yeah.
yeah, what I would say about this is, emotionally across the country, because so many of these different issues don't have nice, fuzzy answers, people are boiling. And then I think, just like if you take, a bag of popcorn and you throw it in there, as the temperature rises, one is liable to, bust. And so I think this dude could easily probably be, at least, he's not the first of many. He's the third one, which is crazy.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Okay. So it is crazy. Anybody listening, I know, like for example, for those who maybe voted for Trump, or for those who are conservative or Republican, I'm just gonna go out and say I voted for Harris. I did. So I just want to say that to those people.
yep.
But I also, I'm gonna say that, and then I actually might upset some of the people who voted for Harris by what I'm getting ready to say, which is that I don't understand the No King's name.
I,
So look, from my understanding, it's No Kings because of this idea that it's going to be this authoritarian government, and Trump as this king thing where he's not acting like a democratic president. He's kind of coming off like a king and going a little bit too far. And I'll be honest, and I don't know if I'm breaking some type of rule on the progressive side, but I haven't seen anything. I don't see anything. I just don't see anything happening right now. I don't know if I was supposed to say that or not. I don't understand. I mean, I guess the immigration thing, that was maybe the one thing that I could see where people might have been upset about, because at the end of the day, they a lot of people know. I mean, depending on where you live. So, like, if you live in New York, if you live in Texas, if you live in California, if you live in certain place like Miami, there's more likelihood that you know immigrants. So I understood that a bit more. And then also too, people who are immigrants that may know other immigrants, or kind of feel a little bit of just like sympathy, or feel a little bit of like just sadness, knowing that these people probably came for a certain. I understood that, but anything since then, I really haven't seen the king the I don't understand the king narrative. I don't understand why people, maybe it's still the immigration piece. And if it is, then I guess I get it. But I just don't see outside of that. But maybe I don't want to get too much on that, because it doesn't take much these days to get clipped up, and something you said can get twisted into another way. So I'm just saying I don't really see the king part. I don't see him acting that way. I see him doing what pretty much every president does. The one thing I might see differently is that he's being a little bit unconventional with who he's bringing into the administration to get stuff done this time around.
so let me. I want to provide some color, because this is honestly my own personal perspective
Right.
as well, and I know it has upset some people, and some people are probably going to
Yeah.
get offended and upset with it. But so be it, right?
Yeah.
I think, yeah. So when we take a step back and we think about like, what do people mean by no kings? I think, yeah, what they're really getting at is like just this idea of like unchecked power, right? Like I think it's in relation to obviously what we've seen with the Supreme Court, and how, through certain nominees and things of that nature, just trying to control and sway which way things are going to go. Obviously, we see it with the Department of War, and then we've also seen it with immigration. And I think the reason why this is important is because we have historical precedents of what this looks like, and is literally called Mussolini and called Hitler. And I think the reason why you have to look at these is because the strategies are very similar. The elements they use to really like gain power and leverage that power for whatever the reason was, it literally looks like today. And so the first one was like they had these ideas of private armies. So for Hitler, it was the brown shirts. For Mussolini, it was the black shirts. For us, it is ICE. And so these aren't necessarily like official kind of like military or whatever, but the way they are perceived and the way they go about their job is very like that, right? Like think about when you see the image of an ICE agent. It was in military gear, bro,
Yeah.
with with military guns. So I think that's the first thing. Second thing is immigration. So literally, if you think about what Hitler, we always think about the Holocaust. I don't know if you've seen or the movie Nuremberg, the Nuremberg trials on Netflix. It is literally about that whole period of time where at the real Nuremberg trials, they shared exactly why and how they went about doing all of that, and it was crazy because literally it was legislation. It wasn't like the Jews, like Hitler and them went to the extent of like saying like, oh, we're just going to kill people. No, it was actual law and policy. And so, and they worded it around with the word immigration. They never said Jews because they knew like the world was going to like take them to court. They literally said immigration. And so that was the same thing that Mussolini did with Italy as well when he was targeting minority groups in Italy. Legislation. What have we done when targeting those exact people that you talked about in California, et cetera? Legislation. And so there's patterns there. And then I think the other thing too is like media. So I think one of the things Trump has a really good understanding of is the media landscape. I think he's been able to gain a lot of mind share by personally, I mean, literally telling people shit is, it's fake news. And now we live in this world of AI and it's like, you don't know what the hell is real. And so at that same time, we can't sit here and act like, there's not propaganda being spun at us. Rather, if it's like all this war shit that is going on, now all of a sudden you got 18 to 25-year-olds getting drafted, like, and all these war, like, the shit is crazy right now, bro. But that was the same time, that was the same thing during those early periods of time. And so I think like when I think of it that way, like at least when I hear no kings, that is what I'm thinking. You had literally people who were kings, controlled a lot of the fucking world, and here is how they did it. Right. And that's just within their country. Right. And so that's kind of how I think of it.
I see, for sure. I get that. I get that. Well, I'll put it like this. It is unfortunate, but one thing that I've seen in history repeat is when things aren't the best in the country, there is typically a need for a scapegoat. And for Germany, that might have been the Jews. For other situations, it could be minorities, and in this case, it might be immigrants. Of course, the scapegoat is not responsible for the entire state of whatever country it is or whatever region it is, but typically it's in the humanity's nature to have the blame game. So I fully understand the multiple perspectives that lie with the immigration piece. And I can see how there could be a slippery slope, especially if they continue to do the raids that were happening in Minnesota in the manner that they did them, because they've been
Yeah.
done before, but it was the manner in which case that they were done that I think even people who supported Trump came out and said, "Oh, that's no, we reduce, we want to reduce the amount of illegal immigrants, but maybe not like that per se." So I understood that piece. However, when I see these assassination attempts and I see what people are talking about, it gives me the impression that people have gone as far as to believe that Trump is the dictator that people think he might become. Not who I guess I see at the moment, but also I understand it's a slippery slope. Maybe some of these guys in the past they didn't appear to be the the corrupt dictator that was unchecked, and maybe that's part of the way that they kind of you know went towards that direction. Who knows? Anyways, look, we have another topic, and this is something that I didn't want to talk about because it's kind of
Oh
like
man,
it's kind of like it's a civil rights organization that's in the fire right now. I didn't want to talk about it because just I wasn't sure. Like I just wasn't sure if that was on code. But at the end of the day, I do want to speak to what is being said, and we could talk about the implications of it and just our general thoughts on this. But basically, the SPLC was indicted by the federal grand jury on multiple charges, including wire fraud, false statement to banks, conspiracy to commit money laundering. The Department of Justice is alleging that they spent over $3 million in donor funds between 2014 and 2023 to informants linked to the KKK, Aryan nations, and Nazi groups. Now, the SPLC stands for Southern Poverty Law Center. It is a nonprofit organization that was founded in 1971. It is headquartered in Montgomery, Alabama. It focuses on civil rights, legal advocacy, and monitoring hate groups. Now, I want to make sure that people listening understand that they have not been fully charged or convicted, I would say, but these charges are significant, they are serious. Now, there is claims from the SPLC where they are basically saying these are nonsense claims. There's no evidence of criminal intent, and that some of the moves that they made are standard. For example, paying informants in the KKK is standard practice for infiltration and things of that nature. And then there are other defenders of this group where they're suggesting that as well. And it is clearly a tricky thing because it's very messy, right? Because on one hand, the federal or the DOJ could be correct. And what that implies is something horrible. I mean, it implies that these groups have started off with great intent, clearly in the 70s, right after, or maybe even during civil rights, were advocates in bringing rights and privileges to people who didn't have as much. And they're basically suggesting that they're taking money that people have donated to help Black people. And I don't know if it just focuses just on Black people. It might also include more, but if I'm looking at if it's in the South, Montgomery, Alabama, I'm assuming it's Black people, and that implies that they've creating scenarios in which case it appeared like there was more hate so that they could get more capital or get more money and do whatever they were doing with that money. Now, here's the thing though. There does seem to be something to be said about what they're coming back out and saying, hey, look, that's a standard practice. It's a standard practice to take money and go into these groups and infiltrate, get information, counter strategies, etc. That's plausible. So I guess we could talk about just what some of these implications, and I don't know what to say about where I lean on it. Obviously, I didn't want to talk about it. I lean more on no, they were doing the right thing. However, if we have to consider the fact that what if they weren't doing the right thing? What does that mean?
yeah. Nah, No, I think we really got to unpack this. And so, yeah, because I was like, man, I've heard of this before, or at least the organization before. So I went and just kind of dove into the history, and I think the history is very important because I think what you'll see over the years is, I think, just, one, a shift, but I can see how this kind of gets a little tricky. So the first thing is like from the 80s to the 90s, they actually were the ones that came up with what is known as like the KKK strategy. And so to actually like, kill a lot of these groups across the South, what they noticed actually work was going to the courts and specifically personally suing like the leaders of these groups and going after like their personal assets. And so like that actually like really worked, right? And I think the reason why that is important is because it was during that period of time, like according to Wikipedia, the SPLC became known basically like the unwritten like definer of what is a hate group. So they've all, whatever they define as a hate group has, I guess, always been accepted as like, okay, we're labeling them a hate group. But I think what is really important is like what you start to see shift is it talks about like the leadership, where in the 90s they had 457 hate groups. By 2011 they had over 1,000, right? And so you're starting to see the numbers increase. And then also you have, they label Turning Point USA as like a hate group. And I think one of the things that's very interesting, like the New York Times called this out, but it was like, basically there's this mission of like, okay, because there's all this hate getting created, it creates more urgency for people to want to donate money, which is like the mechanism here. And I think, the other thing I want to call out too is I didn't know this. This is actually crazy. But like one of the founders got fired a few years ago for some crazy stuff. Uh, yeah, 92% of the
Jeez.
current staff just recommended that like they have no vote of confidence in like the current CEO.
Jeez.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so I do, what I do think is interesting is like it does seem like some things are starting to break. But I think this claim of like secretly paid over 3 million, I'm actually curious to see like what kind of evidence they present, like what is the story they tell
Yes, me
behind
too.
that.
Me too. Yeah, I want to see the
Like,
evidence.
yeah, 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 yeah. Have they shared anything there or
I'm not aware of any evidence. That doesn't mean that there's not that doesn't mean that there isn't any evidence. Like let me just see real quick. Is there any public evidence? Because
yeah, I haven't.
I'm not aware of any evidence, and they're looking at payments. They're basically saying this is what PBS reported. They're saying that payments were routed through shell companies and prepaid cards to conceal the source. And reportedly, yeah, so that's a bit weird to me though, because I don't see the need. I don't know, it's strange. I don't know what any of this means, but it
Let me
would, if you were doing this through, if you're infiltrating, I guess you would need a fake. Would you need a fake company? Like, why do you need a fake company?
But no, 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 think of it this way, bro. These
I
are
see.
people that been doing the work with these KKK folks, bro. And so they have seen historically like the terror that was placed into communities because of the
Yeah,
violence.
yeah,
And so it's like if you are putting someone in there, you're probably assuming if they are caught. Like even what is the movie? What is the
right, right. So you don't want it to trace back, is what you're saying? You're basically saying
yes.
you get the shell,
Was it
and the
called Black Klansman?
yeah, I see. Okay, okay, I got you. The shell is
Yeah.
to yeah, okay. Well, this stuff could be kind of scary then. If what I mean is that if these groups are like if SSF is if this group is basically just doing this to protect themselves and they just look guilty and they look suspicious but they're not guilty and they're not suspicious and then we're kind of like attacking them, that would be horrible, of course. I mean, that'd be extremely horrible. And so we just got to follow this because this is just it's I mean because they're coming out, they're basically accusing these people of faking stuff and making it
No, no,
seem
no.
like
That is what people need to pay attention to. Because if that case is one, the narrative now shifts to we have have proof that all this racism, all this hatred was created out of thin air. It doesn't really exist. They were
Well,
paying people.
right. So then, how about this then? So then we better hope that the case is not one, right, based on the evidence, because then the evidence should show that they weren't faking this stuff. I mean, we'd hope, right? We hope because
I would hope,
that we would
I
hope
would hope too.
because here's the thing, right? It's kind of like with the BLM and Black Lives Matter situation. It's like Black Lives Matter. There were many people that were doing good things and productive things under that umbrella of the movement of Black Lives Matter. But then you had a group of individuals from these different chapters that, because of their actions, because of the fraud that they did, because of the misappropriation of funds that they did, it delegitimized the whole movement, or at least took away a lot of credibility from it because of the actions of a few individuals. And I would hate to see that here, where ultimately, in general, what they do is correct, is right, it serves its purpose and is productive. But then one individual or two individuals or a small subset of individuals takes away the credibility of this, because then then it does become a bit dangerous, because then certain people lose protection, us included, depending on what it is, lose protections. And so it is very serious. And so we definitely need people to follow it. And whether, like, who's listening,
Facts.
I
This
don't
is a
personally
great
care
story to call out, bro.
what I don't care whoever's listening, whether you support all this stuff or whether you don't support it, or whether you are, I don't care who's listening, but I will say I would like everybody to do their best in general to focus on the evidence. So hopefully the evidence is, I'm going to go ahead and put myself out there a little bit. Actually, not even actually, I am hoping that the evidence shows that they were doing these things in a way to protect themselves. And yes, it might look guilty, but it's not what it seems like. And the evidence shows that. I'd hate to be proven wrong on that, but that's where I stand on that. And we don't have to give our personal stances on stuff like this, but since we reported on it.
One thing I do want to add on this is, I mean, like, yeah, I was literally just looking this up because I was curious. I was like, man, like, is this one of those cases, once again, very similar to like Roe v. Wade, a few years ago, where it literally potentially could make it to the Supreme Court and like just shift something? Like, what does the modern world look like when we don't have hate groups? Like we now live in a generation where we weren't around when hate groups didn't exist. Like that
Yeah.
labeling did not exist, right? And so it's like, what happens when that was, you know, you grow up on the internet and all of a sudden the internet don't work. Like,
Yeah.
how is life for you, right? Like, is that potential here? So I do think that's interesting. But what was found was there was a court case in 2022 that made it to the Supreme Court featuring the SPLC. And it was specifically a group out of Florida that was labeled as like, a hate group by the SPLC. And they actually ended up losing that case. And so I do think this is very interesting because there is precedent of, someone else going after, basically this designation of hate groups. I think what is interesting here is it's a different angle, right? And
Well,
so
man, look, there's no hate groups. Everybody better get strong. Everybody, I don't care what you are. I don't care if you're trans. I don't care if you're a white man. I don't care if you're a black woman. I don't care who you are. If you better get strength, and if you don't have physical strength, you better be armed. You better get armed and all the precautions, and maybe invest in security, etc. I mean, I don't want it to go to that, but I'm just a practical person. Like, if things get a little certain way, and maybe I do see a little bit of I don't know what the full intent of everything is. There could be a bad intent, or it could just be an intent to, I do see that things are being pulled apart to some extent. Now, the thing is though, is that if it was only if it was only things towards minorities, then I would say that it looks like bad things are happening. But there's being a tearing apart of more than just things towards minorities. For example, they are the administration is coming for the necks of the pretty much the food companies that have addicted everybody to sugar, addicted everybody to these horrible foods. And then not only that, they're coming after the pharmaceutical industry. So it seems to me that I do see a lot of deconstruction, but I think
Yeah.
it doesn't, I see why people are concerned. But if it was only targeted towards vulnerable groups and just if it was only targeted towards that, I think I would see a little bit more reason to worry. But because I see a dismantling of all these different things, it seems as though that it's not a targeted strategy. And I believe that we're headed towards something new. And if we see things being pulled apart, then I would say the solution is to be a part of whatever comes next and don't just sit back in fear about whatever you think is coming. And I think one of the worst things I see is that people have this helplessness. Well, everything's falling apart, everything's going down, and we can't stop it. We don't have any power. And I think there's probably some ways to influence stuff. So, anyways, outside of that,
Hold on. I want to speak on that real quick.
go ahead, go
It
ahead.
actually made me think of a gym that one of the homies this past weekend that I caught up like really shared. And so for some context, homie works in finance. We were literally just kind of like talking about like generational wealth, things of that nature. And I think, the thing that he really, really like said, someone, had broken down to him is wealth is built in waves, right? And so kind of to your point of being prepared because we are riding a wave right now, not only, politically, not only socially, like everything is riding a wave, but the piece I want to emphasize is even economically, right? And so what he was really talking about was, coming out of the 90s, what happened? You had the internet, you had the .com, boom and bust. But the people who rode that wave out of that got Apple for super cheap and now look at them, right?
Yeah,
Or
yeah.
you had the 2008, it dropped, and then you had 0% interest rates. But the venture capitalists that got Uber, Airbnb, Coinbase, or whoever made a lot of money. And so it's like, how are we also positioning ourselves when these waves come around? Because if you look at the time frame, it's looking like it's every 8 to 12 years. And if the last one happened in 2008,
Right.
and
Yeah.
so we got to be prepared on all fronts to
Oh,
ride
for sure.
all these waves.
100%. And for sure, just to fill in the blank, right now, people should be focused on AI. People should also be focused on the revolution in health, in pharmaceuticals, and then also the
Say
revolution
more
in
about that. Say more about that, like in terms of pharmaceuticals.
yeah, well, yeah, for example, like the administration is coming out and changing a bunch of things. So they've made it so that unhealthy food you can't buy with food stamps, and they're reducing the amount that you can get through food stamps. And then additionally, so then of course businesses that rely on food stamp revenue, they have to either adapt so that they become compliant, and then you also have just like food companies who they know that some upcoming changes in the laws are going to require them to put whether or not they're ultra processed or like really processed food. So now like if food is bad for you or not bad for you, and all these different changes in the food industry, but also the pharmaceutical industry. So, for example, they're changing the scheduling of marijuana on a federal level. It'll still be scheduled, but it will be at a lower schedule. And then another one is they're changing, or I believe they may have just recently changed the scheduling of some psychedelics for the purpose of helping heal trauma, for example, in veterans, but also it could be psychological trauma from verbal or physical or sexual abuse growing up and things of that nature. Mushrooms and all these different tools. MDMA is another one, and so they're doing all these different things. And so you can imagine that companies can now, well, I mean, they'll start offering treatments, legal treatments for to have a psychedelic trip, to have uh, under the under the supervision of a doctor. And then you also have this peptide revolution where essentially there's all these different peptides that you can use for skin, hair, libido, sex drive, etc. You could, I mean, the one that everyone knows is Ozempic. That's the biggest peptide that
Yeah.
everybody knows. And so there's a revolution going on in health and wellness, period. And then additionally, there's a revolution going on in AI. And then there's also going to be a revolution in transportation due to robotics. And I think another one will be robotics. And so when it comes to the wealth that's being built or to capture the next wave of wealth, it's right in front of us if we stop focusing on whether or not whether or not Clay and Meg are in a relationship, if we stop focusing on whether or not uh, whether or not Trump is in office and he's doing whatever he's doing and it's not affecting your daily life, unless it is. If it is, if you're an immigrant, I'm not saying to not watch that. Watch that. Your eyes should be glued to the screen. But for the 300 million people, 320 million people who are not immigrants, unless like maybe there's something else to focus on. Maybe we shouldn't focus on what LeBron said about Memphis. Like that's what I'm getting at is that there is better things to focus on, and if you blink, you will miss the wave, and you will not build, you will not be able to capitalize off it. It's happening right in front of us, and it's cool to hop in the Waymo, but don't just consume it. At the same time, though, the way our system works is that there always has to be consumers.
Facts.
So it's a little tricky because nobody's gonna tap you on the shoulder and tell you, hey, start producing. Like nobody's gonna tell you to stop consuming. It is what it is. Hey,
But I think you bring. I mean, I feel like that's just a central theme of our pod, bro, and just our conversations on a daily, bro. We're living in one of the greatest times to produce. It has never
yes.
been easier. It has
Oh
never been
yes, for
easier to
sure.
produce, right?
For sure.
So
And we're gonna have to expand more on that, just in general, that general topic or theme of just producing and focusing and locking in, because this is a time to do that, and there are a trillion distractions right now, literally. And I get it. Like there are things to be upset about. I'm sure if I actually went looking for stuff, I would find something to be upset about or something that I should be trying to spend my time to dedicate towards. At the end of the day, though, there needs to be people who that lock in and understand the opportunities in front of them and just ride this wave, because everybody can't just be. Everybody has their own role to play, I guess. So I guess if choose your role, but don't be surprised when you choose your role and you end up with the rewards that you get in the end. You see what I'm saying? So
that's real, bro.
speaking,
That's real.
yeah, yeah. Speaking of though, just some of this new stuff, like you mentioned AI, and we talk about AI every pod because AI is the dominant thing going on in tech right now. So two things, well at least actually let's three things, and then Brylan will respond whichever one he wants to. But basically,
Yeah.
first thing is that ChatGPT dropped Images 2.0. Images 2.0 allow you to generate images on ChatGPT. You could already do that, but these images are they have a higher quality. But then additionally, they're more precise with adding text to the image. So they're really good for banners and ads and maybe just marketing materials. So marketing teams might really like this, but also maybe even developers as well. And then maybe just random stuff. Maybe your kid is having a birthday party and you want to put his name on an image or something, his or her name. So that's something that you can do now. Another thing is that the terms of the Microsoft and OpenAI deal have changed. So that's something that recently came out. I think actually probably earlier this morning. And then you have Elon Musk and Sam Altman, and they started the trial today. Now, ultimately, just to recap real quick, Elon Musk is essentially just saying that he donated, 40 to 50 million dollars to OpenAI in the early days when it was just a nonprofit, and that OpenAI basically deceived them and breached their fiduciary responsibilities to stay a nonprofit and turn themselves into a for-profit that is closely partnered with Microsoft, which goes against the original mission statement and the original agreement. So he dropped the fraud cases or the charges that he was bringing forth, but he still ultimately is bringing forth that.
This is good. So let me just ask questions because if I'm be
Sure.
honest, I think all three are very fascinating. I want to start with the last two because the fact that that is the angle that he's taking, I think it is a very strong position because it's going to be hard to argue that that is not the case, right? I think the other thing too that is very interesting is when you think about the Microsoft and OpenAI story, are they cutting the deal to better position themselves, in relation to this case? Very, very fascinating if Microsoft is a big piece of the puzzle here, right? Because I think, it just paints a different picture of what their relationship may have looked like. And so I'm curious, like, yeah, do you think this case has legs? And if so, like, what are the implications? Like, is this just another distraction, or is this something people should be taking seriously?
Well, I can tell you what the market thinks. On Polymarket, there's a 50-50 split
Really?
between,
Okay.
yeah, it's a 50-50 split. That's the last I seen it. Polymarket changes every hour, though, or every minute. So maybe it's different, but it's 50-50. So that could be, that shows that people are seeing it can go either way. So I think that my first thought is definitely what you said, which is that Musk is claiming something that's pretty obvious, that when they originally started, it was a nonprofit and they're changing it to, or they changed it to a for profit. And so that's in his favor. But I think what's not in his favor, though, is the text messages that show that he wanted to switch it to a for profit and then also bring it into Tesla. So I think that those kind of take away from his credibility. I think that now maybe, and it just depends on whether or not his donation came with a contract. Did it come with a contract when he gave the $50 million? Did that come with a specific contract? Did it, or was it a verbal agreement? If it was verbal, then I mean, it's like, well, I don't think it's gonna go. But I think there's details that have to be figured out still in regards to that. But well, I think there's details that have to be figured out in regards to that. And I think that, but ultimately though, I think that in my opinion, what Elon is doing is he's just trying to slow down OpenAI, and I think he is just trying to be a distraction. I think he is upset that it didn't go the way that he wanted to, and I also think that he didn't care until they really really got huge. I mean, I think even I saw,
That's fair.
yeah, I saw a post where he had mentioned how I think it was GPT 2.5 or 3 or 3. And just so people know, I think ChatGPT was 3 point. Actually, it might have been 3, but I think he said 2.5. He was impressed by the models at 2.5, and he seemed to have like a positive sentiment on OpenAI. But I think that ChatGPT moment was it wasn't he. I don't think he liked that because I think it put Sam in a position where it I think it put Sam in a different position. But then also maybe that's when he first found out about the Microsoft deal. So who knows?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I guess something I'm just very curious about is he suing them for any money, or like is he looking like what's he looking to gain out of this?
Right? I don't know. I really don't know.
Like, is there IP he's trying to take, or
Right, because for example, if he wants the money back, I mean, they could give him the money back. They could give him the money back. Let's see damages, and he's saying that he the damages, if they get awarded, he would like them to go to OpenAI's nonprofit arm, and those damages could be upwards of $150 billion from OpenAI and Microsoft. So I guess they're kind of maybe both might be brought in on this, um, but I don't know. Like, I just have doubts. I have doubts around this, and I think another outcome is that they want to remove Sam as well and Greg. Greg's the president of OpenAI, and then also cut off Microsoft ties. But I think what Elon's asking for, I think it's a huge headache. I think it's a huge headache, and I'm not sure that it's going to go through. But then again, Elon's the type of guy who, I'm not going to lie to you, judges are supposed to be objective.
Hmm.
But when you have people who are extremely powerful and you're like weighing in, like that comes in, man. That comes
That's
in.
real.
That comes in. So I don't know. Like maybe the judge is an Elon fan, and he's not supposed to take that into account. But this is one of those ones where I feel like discernment is going to be used by the judges.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And where is this being fought? In California? In
Probably,
Oakland? I
probably.
think it was Oakland if I read that right. Yeah, I think that's going to be interesting. The other piece that I thought was very fascinating, bro, is yeah, specifically story one that you were talking about, the new image model. I
Yeah,
think the reason why image. So think about it. When it come to the performance of these models on specifically benchmarks, rather if the benchmarks is like how well they use a browser, how well can they code, fundamentally those two things have been underpinned by code and images, right? And the reason why I think this is very important is because very similar to what physics taught us that gravity just exists. I think what you're seeing is like this language of intelligence being code, which is logic, and images being like visual, what we see. And the reason why this is important is because, bro, think about where images show up, right? So if we think about it in terms of consumer, think about what over the 2010s or whatever, you saw Instagram take off images. Now you're starting to see video, TikTok, YouTube, or whatever. What is a video
right.
made of? It's
Yeah,
just frames of
series.
images.
Yeah, series. Yeah,
Exactly. And so I think that is very interesting. But then on the consumer side, I thought this was a very interesting because I saw a few like images be created like this. But think about PowerPoint slides. I didn't know 500 million people a month use PowerPoint slides, bro. And so when
right.
you think about using, not everybody has the skill of making PowerPoint slides, but think about what what did Claude just roll out a few weeks ago? Claude Design. We now
Right.
know that OpenAI follows quickly behind. They will have their own design tool. We can make that assumption. They have a powerful image model, bro. And so think about one
Yeah,
of the use cases for Claude Design is literally making slides.
yeah, for
OpenAI can
sure.
now,
Yeah,
you know what I
for
mean? And
sure.
so they might have with this move, bro. I can see it being a very interesting enterprise like use case, bro. Like if they potentially went after some of those,
Yeah,
where images play.
yeah. I'm not gonna lie. The image move. I mean, I didn't expect it. I wasn't really thinking about images. I'm not gonna lie. I won't. And another thing I will say is that I mean the text precision is. I mean,
You've used it?
yes, yes. It's. I mean, I can't. It's really hard to believe. It's really hard to believe that we can generate a realistic looking image and put text into it and it be precise. And it didn't take that long. It was just 2 years ago where you could make the images, but the text would be weird, and it's like you couldn't quite. It's like you kept talking to it, but it wouldn't. But now you can really like that. That's a level of man. That's a level of intelligence that's pretty. That's next level. I mean, I don't know if people understand, but if they're giving that out on like a scaled level, that means that when they are internal and they come up with images, when they like apply like a lot of intelligence to it, I mean those images probably look beyond real. Like they probably look like they probably just they're probably yeah
That is actually crazy to think about.
yeah because they're giving us the scaled version. This ain't nothing. Like this is what they can scale. Like this is just what they can scale to everybody. Like
Yeah, yeah,
imagine what
yeah,
they
yeah,
can
yeah.
just like imagine what they can do in the lab in the research
Yeah,
lab. It's and I'm already and I think Sam knows this because his World ID project, not to because we're coming up on
yeah, yeah, yeah.
the
Unpack
end,
that.
but
Didn't he just have like a presentation or something recently.
Yes, yes, he did. So let me just bring up the core facts around the World ID event, and basically, I'll just give you just the quick. So World ID last week. Well, just to rewind a bit. World ID is this concept, maybe even more than a concept now, but essentially started by Sam Altman and somebody else. I forgot who it is, but and its core premise is that we're not going to be able to tell what's real online, who's real, and we're going to need a way to verify that. So World ID proposes a solution where and you can go to a kiosk. For example, if you're in LA, you can go to West Hollywood. In Michigan, you can go to Auburn Hills. In certain in all these different states, they have these kiosks or these buildings where you go in and there's these orbs. And these orbs, you walk up to them and they scan your eye and they create a digital cryptographic signature of your iris, basically. And it is maybe similar to the not entirely, but if you think about Face ID, etc., there's a similar concept where they're creating a specific signature, and with your iris, there's a level of uniqueness that can't be faked. And so a couple of weeks ago, or about 10 days ago, OpenAI had its liftoff event where Tinder and Zoom and DocuSign did some demos. Now, the one I thought was very interesting, and now I think these are kind of self evident. Of course, you would want to know if a human signed the document. Of course, you would want to know if your Tinder date is real. Like those are kind of self evident. But I thought that the Zoom one was interesting because it was suggesting this, and we've heard about deepfakes, but the level of deepfake that they demoed was another level. And this ties exactly to this images conversation that we're talking about, because I think that internally they know that deepfakes are at another level. It's just a matter until they can scale that, and if they'll ever scale that to everybody. But the Zoom demo that they showed was, and I believe the CEO of Zoom was there, but they showed a Zoom meeting, a regular Zoom meeting, and there was a guy that was supposed to be real on the Zoom, and he wasn't real, but it was a video stream. So he was like, he had the mannerisms and he looked real, like it was a video. And then the real guy comes on, and you could tell that he's real because he had like a verification symbol, but then also he was the World app on his phone was able to verify him live that it was a real human being on the meeting and using the World ID technology. Now, World ID is also backed by this token called World Coin. And World Coin, it's a bit confusing, but essentially it's tied to this the identities. For example, if you go and get a World ID, you get a certain amount. Everybody's entitled to a certain amount of World Token. Everybody's entitled to a certain amount of World Token. Every human, but essentially, World Token is going to be exchanged in regards to verifications, etc. I believe that the burden of pricing will go on the verifier, not the person being verified. I don't know this for sure, but and that may affect the price. And then AI will use verification services, etc., which also may affect the price. So there's a lot of dynamics that might be at play. But when you think about these labs that might have these crazy technologies, and then you also see Sam racing ahead with just this like technology that just seems to be in the right place for a problem that he seems to be creating. Isn't that? Am
Yeah.
I just? Am I just? Am I missing something?
No, I don't think you're missing something, bro. I don't think you're missing something. I think is what's even fascinating as well is you know, someone called out a few weeks ago once again that he doesn't have any equity, at least that we know of in OpenAI. But once again, WorldCoin, if WorldCoin solves what it needs to
Yeah.
solve,
Well,
like
yeah. I think it's because Sam. I honestly think that Sam got crazy rich off Bitcoin. And so I think he has more money than people think. Like,
Yeah.
I don't think he needs any cash.
Yeah. I mean, I do think what is also interesting is, man, the narratives around these AI CEOs. Like, we've obviously spent a ton of time speaking about what the dominant narrative has been around Dario, but I do think over the next year or so, I mean, you've really called out some really important points. Rather, if it's the images continuing to get better from what we see, but also getting us to think about, like, just imagine what it's like internally to, like, now we can see all the problems it might create to him being the solution. Like, he's positioned himself
Right.
in this, yeah, like but it matters though in this game, bro. Like, we are seeing that people in the markets swing to whoever they believe a little bit more, right? And I do think probably over the last few months, even kind of, we've seen it when they took that deal from the Pentagon, it hit
Right.
him, and
It
then
did.
someone shooting
It
at his
did.
house, like,
It did.
so yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I will say, and I don't know, this is pretty much the end of we're pretty much at time now, but I will say that hit on his house is an early sign of something crazy. Like that's not normal. Tech CEOs typically don't get targeted like that. And maybe it's similar to the United Health CEO targeting, and maybe it's just a general targeting of wealthy people, but that I think that's something that I think people have already moved on from, but they shouldn't forget.
Yeah, 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 yeah. That's a really good point. But once again, how we started is how we're going to finish, bro. The climate is crazy right now.
The climate is real. You know what it is, man. It just seems like people are really ready to fight. Like people are ready to kill you. If you don't like if you're not on the right side of something, people are ready to kill you. That's what it really. That's what I'm seeing. That's what I'm
Yeah,
seeing. I'm seeing it's people are trying to take you out if they do not like what you're saying, if they don't like what you're
yeah.
working on. So and you can't really see what angle it might come from.
Hey, nah, you're spot on, bro. So, nah, this was a
Yeah,
great conversation, man. We touched on a lot. Hopefully, the
yeah,
listeners got one or two things they can, sit with. But nah, great chopping it up, man.
yeah. Let's wrap this up. Let's wrap this up.